Bonjour, bienvenue. My name is Alexandra. I have been a proud member of the Viking family for the past 5 years. I work in the brand and communications department in our California office, but originally I am from France. I was born and raised in Paris. While growing up there, I was fortunate to spend many of my weekends and vacations in Normandy. So it is my privilege today to take you on a virtual journey to France. Before my colleague Joost in Basel joins me to answer some of your questions, let's watch a short video that will bring this truly remarkable itinerary to life. Allons-y.
This 8-day itinerary features iconic Paris, plus the quiet beauty of Normandy. Your journey begins as you board your Viking ship, located near the Eiffel Tower. It's an ideal base from which to explore the city's many wonders as you enjoy an overnight stay. Then it's on to La Roche, Guyon and Vernon, where you're welcomed by beautiful half-timbered houses in these quintessentially French villages. You'll travel on to Giverny, home of Impressionist Claude Monet, and stroll through his beloved gardens. In Rouen, the detailing on the spectacular Gothic cathedral will take your breath away. Along the Normandy coast, set foot on the D-Day landing beaches and pay tribute to the soldiers of World War II. You'll sail on to picturesque Les Andelys with its imposing Chateau Gaillard. From Le Pec, you'll sail off for Napoleon's Chateau Malmaison, where he spent his final days in France. Or you can explore the majestic Palace of Versailles on an optional excursion. Your memorable Viking voyage concludes back in Paris, where you may choose to extend your stay and explore even more of this remarkable city.
I highly recommend that you extend your stay. There is so much to do in Paris, you will not regret it. And it might sound a bit cliché, but simply spending the afternoon at a terrace in a cafe, reading the newspaper, watch people for hours, is a pleasure worth experiencing while you're here. Now, let's take a closer look at this itinerary. Your journey begins and ends in Paris. There are 2 overnight stays in the French capital to give you extra time to really immerse yourself in a Parisian life. The itinerary is 8 days, and you will also call on La Roche-Guyon, Rouen, Les Andelys, and Le Pec. One highlight is a full day at the historic Normandy beaches, where you will visit World War II landmarks. You will experience history firsthand at the site of the D-Day landing. In total, your voyage includes 6 guided tours. And if you have traveled with Viking before, you know we have the most knowledgeable tour guides. These excursions take you closer to your destinations in France. If you'd like to arrive early and get oriented, Viking has curated 2 pre-extensions available for you. These packages are a wonderful option before and after your sailing. You can also visit Oxford in England, where you can tour Highclere Castle, truly an incredible estate. I had the privilege of visiting, and you will not want to miss it if you have the opportunity. You can see from the icon on the map next to Paris that it is where you will embark and disembark on this 8-day journey. As you sail along the Seine River towards Rouen, towards the beaches of Normandy, you will call on several charming cities and villages. You will discover French history, art, food, and customs. Day 1, welcome to Paris, where your voyage begins. Some of you will join us after your pre-extension stay. Others will arrive in France today. If you have arranged air travel through Viking, we will transfer you from the airport to your awaiting river ship. After settling into your stateroom, the afternoon is yours to relax, explore the city on your own, and we also offer a welcome walk to get you oriented. Most people say that Paris is one of the most romantic destinations in the world. You will get a sense of this everywhere, especially in the architecture. It's truly a stunning city. Your ship will dock very close to the Eiffel Tower. For those of you who do not know, the Eiffel Tower was built in 1889 as the grand entrance to the Paris World Exposition. Originally, the Eiffel Tower was not well received. Parisian artists thought the tower was a monstrosity and said so in their petition, Artists Against the Eiffel Tower. For some 4 decades, the Eiffel Tower was the world's tallest building, until the New York Chrysler Building opened in 1930. Let's watch a short video with some recommendations for your time in Paris.
Paris, the city of light, an inspired destination that has drawn travelers from all over the world for centuries. A wonderful place to start is right here on Paris's left bank, the Shakespeare & Company bookstore. The American George Whitman turned this former monastery into a literary haven that has been a favourite stop for poets, writers and book lovers for over half a century. Of course, there's also strolling the Champs-Élysées, Paris's most famous street. And just beyond, the towering Arc de Triomphe. Be sure to give yourself ample time at the Louvre, where gallery upon gallery of priceless, beautiful art is waiting. And an absolute must is coffee in the Saint-Germain district. It's been said you can't sit here for more than half an hour without someone you know passing by. This is a city to delight all your senses. And of course, oysters and white wine must be the perfect finish to a day in Paris. Experience magical Paris for yourself with a Viking Explore More package, before or after your cruise. You'll enjoy a guided tour and a comfortable centrally located hotel, complete with a Viking host in the lobby ready to assist and make recommendations during your stay. Bienvenue! Welcome to Viking's real Paris. We can't wait to share it with you. See you soon! À tout à l'heure!
That video mentioned one of my favorite neighborhoods, Saint-Germain-des-Prés. It's located in the 6th arrondissement. Saint-Germain-des-Prés is also a fantastic shopping and food destination. For example, Debov et Gallet is the oldest chocolate shop in Paris, dating back to 1800. And sure, you make time for desserts and baked goods. Saint-Germain is a neighborhood that has always attracted writers and artists alike gathering at cafes. This picture is actually my grandfather at a terrace of Brasserie Lippe in Saint-Germain. One of the oldest universities in Paris, founded in 1872, Sciences Po, is in this neighborhood. And this is where I went to school. So this area of Paris is extra special for me. Do not miss a visit there. Along the river, on your second day in Paris, there are many remarkable sights for you to take in. Here you see a picture of the Orsay Museum on the left bank of the Seine. This museum is home to mainly French artists from mid-19th century to early 1900s. But the museum itself is also an architectural wonder in its own right. It used to be a train station, now classified as a historical monument. In a different neighborhood of Paris, you can also visit Montmartre and the Sacré-Cœur. During the day or late in the evening, you must stop by the Louvre. The Louvre is home to Mona Lisa, the marble statue of Venus de Milo, and the paintings of Delacroix, Géricault, and Vermeer. You can spend an entire day in this museum. As you walk through Paris, you will have ample opportunities to learn and sample the finest French products. Every time I travel to Europe, my colleague Joost and I never miss a chance to have cheese together. As we say au revoir to Paris and start our sailing to Normandy, we will definitely have more opportunities to talk about cheese. Day 3. Today you will call on the picturesque village of La Roche-Guyon. This is your gateway to Giverny, the home of the founder of Impressionism, Claude Monet. You can experience Monet's gardens by foot or bicycle. His farmhouse has been restored, and within the gardens, you will see the famed Japanese bridge, water lilies, wisterias, azaleas, and much more. Let's take a closer look at Monet's garden and masterpieces.
Claude Monet, impressionist master and interpreter of the world around him. No visit to Monet's home was ever considered complete until you'd had a walk in one of his 2 stunning gardens. Everyone's familiar with Monet's gardens at Giverny, but did you know each flower's colour and placement was chosen for its glow in the sunlight? The paintings that once seemed filled with imaginary colours I now see are but real reflections of the vivid surroundings and an absolute feast for the senses. If there ever was a room with a view, this is it. Monet so loved his Giverny gardens, he remained there for 43 years. With a focus on colour, he personally continually changed and improved the garden layouts, even though he had 7 gardeners. In his last 30 years, Monet created many of his most memorable works. During this incredibly productive period, his paintings focused almost exclusively on his Giverny gardens, the pond, and his beloved water lilies. Monet was the most successful commercial artist of his time, and his works are more valuable than ever, with one version of the water lily selling for more than $70 million. While Monet passed away in 1926, his gardens and his spirit clearly live on. This is magic. I feel like I'm part of an impressionist painting. And you can feel this way too, on Viking's Paris and the Heart of Normandy river cruise.
In addition to his water lily scenes, Monet is also famous for his series of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Rouen, which is our next port of call. So here we are, in the medieval city of Rouen, and also the cultural capital of Normandy. Here you can also see the famous Gothic Notre Dame Cathedral, a favorite subject of Claude Monet. It's been said that he painted the cathedral more than 30 times, each canvas depicting a different time of the day and varying weather conditions. The city is perhaps best known as the site of Joan of Arc's last stand. She was tried, condemned, and executed here in the early 15th century. You will also travel to the Norman countryside and learn more about local products. The products that have made this region famous are cider, Calvados, and cheese. If you are not familiar with Calvados, it is an apple brandy. It's delicious. The most famous cheeses from this area are Camembert, Neuchâtel, Pont-l'Évêque, and Livarot. But let's talk more about cheese with Joost later on. Rouen is not far from the nearby town of Honfleur and the Old Harbour, which has provided inspiration for painters for centuries. After your excursion, you will have a bit more free time in Rouen. Your ship remains docked here overnight before we head to the Normandy beaches. On day 5, you will visit the D-Day beaches. We have 2 included tours for you to choose from. One is focused on the contributions of the US Allied troops. The other is focused on the British Commonwealth and Canadian soldiers. But first, let's delve a bit deeper into the history of the D-Day beaches. Here is a video.
The peace and tranquility of this French coastline belies its turbulent past. It was along these Normandy beaches that the course of world history changed forever. On June 6, 1944, the Allies landed. Facing imposing terrain, stormy weather, and near constant enemy fire, more than 150,000 troops fought their way ashore. Today, reminders of the D-Day battle line the coast. An exploration of Normandy's rugged shores serves as a stark reminder of the daunting odds those young soldiers faced in their quest to free Europe. Omaha Beach was the scene of D-Day's most intense combat. amid the mined hedgehogs and machine gun fire, thousands of brave soldiers fell in their quest to control this 5-mile-long beach. Pointe du Hoc, overlooking vital coastline, posed a massive threat. Army rangers scaled 100-foot cliffs to reach it and fought 2 days to hold it. This labyrinth of bunkers and bomb craters is a vivid window into the past. Of Normandy's sites, perhaps none is more significant than this one. We're at the American Military Cemetery near Omaha Beach in France. This is the final resting place of almost 10,000 young American soldiers. It's a place that must never be forgotten. Spanning 172 acres, the cemetery serenely honors these brave young men, most of whom lost their lives during D-Day operations.
The Normandy American Cemetery is actually located right above the battlefield here on Omaha Beach. On 6 June, this was a scene of absolute carnage. This place, it provokes deep thought and contemplation. You have to stop and think, how many places in the world can you go and stand and look and realize that the course of human history changed right here?
Learning about the D-Day landings is important for all generations, and having time to experience the American Military Cemetery, quiet solitude of the memorial, and the Garden of the Missing gives the chance for all to pay respects to those that gave their lives so that we could live.
Here in this place, where the West held together, let us make a vow to our dead. Let us show them by our actions that we understand what they died for. Strengthened by their courage, heartened by their value, and born by their memory, let us continue to stand for the ideals for which they lived and died.
A visit to the D-Day beaches is a moving experience for sure, and not one you will forget. The Arromanches Débarquement D-Day Museum will include a stop at the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial overlooking Omaha Beach. The French referred to the D-Day as le débarquement de Normandie, or the Normandy landing. There is a lot of gratitude in France for those who participated in the Normandy landings. School children still visit the site on class trips to learn about the history and the Allied troops who were welcomed here as heroes. It is difficult to describe, but it is a very profound and moving moment once you get there. Alternatively, you can begin your excursions in Bayeux and see one of the most famous works of medieval art in the Western world. The Bayeux Tapestry documents William the Conqueror's invasion of England and the death of Anglo-Saxon King Harold in the Battle of Hastings. For those who have traveled with us on ocean ships, you will recognize the tapestry image displayed in the ship stairwell with scene-by-scene descriptions. You will continue your visit to Juno Beach. Then drive to the British Cemetery at Renville, the first village to be liberated by the British. That concludes our time in Normandy as we set sail to Les Andelys, best known for the Château Gaillard. As you can see from this aerial view, this medieval castle overlooks the entire city and the river. It was built in 1196 by Richard the Lionheart. The castle's hilltop location gave Richard a great vantage point over Les Andelys. Château Gaillard was cleverly constructed to ensure that an invading army could enter from only one side by following a narrow strip of land. This blocked any attacks during his lifetime. Day 7. We have nearly completed our round-trip voyage and are heading back to Paris. But first, this morning, you will disembark in Le Pecq, a lovely waterfront town. There, you can visit the historic Château de Malmaison, where Napoleon Bonaparte spent his final days in France. Or enjoy a day at the former home of French kings Château de Versailles, which is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. 3 kings lived here, and each one expanded the palace and its gardens, most famously Louis XIV, the Sun King. Welcome back to Paris for the last night of your sailing. This is a chance to experience the city after dark. Paris is called the City of Light for a reason. Each historical monument along the river is illuminated at night. Your sailing comes to a close. After breakfast on board, many of you will disembark and proceed to the airport for your return flight home. Or perhaps you've chosen to continue your voyage with Viking. We have several excellent post-extension options as we discussed early on. That concludes our presentation on Paris and the heart of Normandy. Now, I would like to welcome my colleague Joost Wendag, our VP of Product Development in Basel, so we can both answer some of your questions.
Thank you, everyone, for watching this episode. We will now take some questions. I am with my colleague Joost Wendag, and Heather will be reading some questions for us.
Thanks, Alexandra. Our first question comes from Sherry in Greenville in the United States. She says, we want to schedule this cruise and take the excursion to see the Bayeux Tapestry. Is this excursion always an option? Also, we know the tapestry is scheduled to leave its current location temporarily and be on loan to the UK. Do you know when this will be and how long for?
Yes, the tapestry is scheduled to travel to the UK in 2022. But the last news I know of was in 2019, which means this was all pre-COVID. And I would keep an eye out on the news about the tapestry, because that may very well now change in the wake of the crisis.
Thank you, Joost. Our next question comes from Keith in Bradenton in the United States. He says, can you tell us what the difference is between a deluxe veranda and a French veranda stateroom?
It's primarily the size, and the configuration is a little bit different. You would really, the best people to ask these questions are the people in the call center, because they know inside out every detail, and they can have a bit of a dialogue with you to figure out what it is that works best for you. It all depends on your personal preferences.
Thank you. This is probably a question for Alexandra. It comes from Ramon in the United States. He says, when is the best time to travel to Paris? And if he had 2 days in the city, what would be the best things to do?
It's always our sailing season is in March, starts in March, and the best time to travel, I would say, is the spring and the summer. The summer months are really nice in France. And also the summer season includes special events throughout the country. For example, I know that the city of Rouen puts out a light show in the summer projecting some of Monet's work on the Rouen Cathedral. So the summer is always a really good choice.
Thank you. Another question, probably for Alexandra, comes from Michael in the United States. He asks, how useful is it to be able to speak a little French?
It's always nice to be able to say a few words, and French people really appreciate the attempt. They will most likely switch to English very, very quickly and make it easier for you. But if you start off by saying bonjour or a few words in French, it will help.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question comes from Jennifer in Elkhart in the United States. She says, do you feel that the evening boat rides with the meals going by the Paris sites would be worth doing? Or would you recommend the Moulin Rouge or a nightclub evening show instead?
Alex, what do you think?
I did both. I think it depends on your preference. I really do like everything that you see from the river. Though, while the ship sails, you will see that as well. If you have time to do both, do both. And it's a preference. It matters what you would like to do. Both are great options.
Yeah. If I were to have to if I would just have time for one, I would probably go with the ship. And I pick the smallest ship that you can find, just because it's much more fun to have a somewhat more intimate cruise than something that is, they have these big ships, and in the evenings it's fine. If you do it during the day, you'll have French school kids, and French school kids are just the same as school kids everywhere else. It's just not so enjoyable.
Thank you. Next question is from Diane in the United States. She says, is it possible to do a side trip to Tours or Poitiers?
Before or after the cruise, not during, because it's too far. It's really too far.
Thank you. Next question comes from Brenda in the United States. She said, what's the progress of the Notre Dame restoration? Are any of the historical sites included in this itinerary, and will a Viking guide take you there?
That is a process that will take years. And as far as I know, the immediate surroundings are still closed off. Emmanuel Macron wanted it open very quickly. And he has since kind of walked that back a little bit because it needs to be done well. And I think this is something that will probably take at least another 2 years or so.
Thank you, Joost. I'll just read out a lovely comment that's come in from Susan in the United States. She says, I just want to say this was my first cruise and it was wonderful. The sights, sounds, tour guides and staff were terrific. This trip is a memory that has helped me get through this year.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Very good.
Next question comes from Diane in Arlington in the United States. She says, is it possible to go to the Shakespeare and Company bookstore in Paris?
Yes, absolutely.
It's smack dab in the middle of the city. It's easy to get to. It's actually sort of right across the street from Notre Dame.
Thank you, Joost. Our next question comes from Scott in Grapevine. He says, on a prior Viking River cruise, we stayed at the Pullman Eiffel Tower. Is it possible to request this hotel for the France's Finest cruise?
No. We try to be very consistent in the hotels that we pick for our extensions. And so it's not unreasonable that you would end up staying there again, because we do love that hotel and we do love the location, and you have these little balconies that have views of the Eiffel Tower, and it's magnificent. But it does, from time to time, we need to make changes for whatever reason. Sometimes a hotel is taken over by new management that it doesn't necessarily want to deal with us. So there are changes, and it's hard to guarantee. I would always just ask, where will I end up if I book an extension with you? What hotel are you using?
Thank you, Joost. Nancy in Ocala says, are we going to be able to go all the way to the top of the Eiffel Tower? And also, is it possible to take a tour inside the Louvre?
Well, yes, you can go all the way to the top. It depends a little bit on how fit you are. Now, joking aside, there are elevators that will take you all the way there. I find that you don't need to go all the way to the top to have the Eiffel Tower looking all over Paris experience. It's nice, but that last extra level from the view, it's like you're already really high and then you get super high. Yes, you can take a tour of the Louvre. We offer those as part of the optional excursion program. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Kathleen in Corvallis asks, could you tell us about the exact docking locations of the Viking ships in Paris?
Yes, it depends a little bit on what year you will travel in. Going forward, we will end up in a location at the Pont de Grenelle, which is kind of, I would say, 3 bridges away from the Eiffel Tower. We're currently still docked in Le Pec, which is a very wealthy and very opulent suburb of Paris that is close to Versailles and that has a series of palaces of its own.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question comes from Lucy. She says, we're taking this cruise in June 2022 with the 3-day post extension in Paris. What are your recommendations for other places we shouldn't miss in the city, such as other restaurants or museums?
Oh, that's one for you, Alex.
I like Saint-Germain neighborhood a lot, so I would not miss spending a lot of time in Saint-Germain, walking in the streets and sitting at cafes, enjoying your time there, just being there. Paris is a beautiful city with monuments and historical classified monuments every block. So just spending time enjoying and soaking in the architecture is what I would do.
Lovely, thank you very much. Barry in Sarasota says, can I do this cruise and also include a visit to Mont Saint Michel?
Mont Saint Michel? No. You would need to do that before or after. In theory, you could travel there from Rouen, which is about as far west as we get on this cruise, but that is a killer of a day. And I'll give you a little secret tip. When you want to go to Mont Saint Michel, what you should really do is position yourself close by so that you can go there at the crack of dawn or as early as you possibly can. Mont Saint Michel is one of the places that is sometimes also visited by these very, very large cruise ships. Unlike our ocean ships, these are ships that hold 3,000 people. And Mont Saint Michel, if you're there by 11 o'clock in the morning, it sometimes can get very, very congested. So to see it, you would need to set up a little bit of a stay in the Breton countryside.
Thank you, Joost. Our next question is from Helen in Dalton in the United States. She says that she uses a walker. Would this itinerary be accessible for her?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there's always, and this is the beauty of a river cruise, the ship is a platform. It also is a great place to observe the passing scenery, and you get to pace yourself. In every city in Paris, you will find that the more you can walk, the more you can explore. And that's obviously easier said than done. I would talk to the people on the ship so that you can kind of pace yourself a little bit. It all depends on how well you are with the walker. My mother used to have a walker and she could go, she was just not very good on her legs, but she could go as far as she needed. If that's the case, then all that it takes is a little bit of extra time, which we will give you on the shore excursions. And if it is more a matter of, okay, I can only walk so much, you'll have choices. You'll have options of doing more extended walks or doing shorter walks. So you'll be fine. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our next question is from Frederick in Marietta in the United States. He says, will it be possible to visit some of the jazz clubs and especially the neighborhoods of Sidney Bechet, Josephine Baker, Richard Wright and James Baldwin in Paris?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's all he goes. That's entirely possible. You would want to do the, okay, so here's how I would go about this, because this is kind of a somewhat specialized request. Yes, this is the jazz scene of the starting in the 30s all the way to the 60s. I would do this at the end of my trip, and at the start of the trip, I would ask the program director to connect you with someone who can do a somewhat specialized tour with you. That's the best way to go about this. Paris is relatively, it has a compact center, but it's still quite big. And what you want is something that is relatively specific. So I would get the help from an expert.
Thank you, Joost. Next question comes from Gerald in Antioch in the United States. He asks, what is the dress code on board?
Casual, elegant. You don't have to dress up. You can, by and large, come as you are. Some people, especially for dinner, like to dress up a little bit. But there is no such thing as a rigidly enforced dress code. We want everyone to be comfortable, and you'll be traveling with like-minded travelers. So it never is really a big issue, we find. Comfortable, classy, elegant, not over the top.
And you can go shopping in Paris.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Connie in the United States. She says, is it possible to visit the opera when in Paris? Do our schedules coincide with performances?
That's always a really tricky question, because you could be in town where there's a lot of choice, and you could be in town in a week where everything is sold out. It's just really hard. What I would say is, once you've settled on a particular time frame, start looking right away, and then by now a lot of these venues have English websites, and that's the easiest way to go. To wait with this until you get there is, depending on how important it is to you, to wait for it until you get to Paris is setting yourself up for disappointment.
Thank you, Joost. A couple of nice comments are coming in about the sweaters you're both wearing. Kenneth in Pacific Grove says, where could he get one? Is it possible to buy them on board?
Yes.
Both. You can also buy them online on the Adele website.
Yeah.
I think we do have a link on our website to go to the Dale website.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Russell in Austin says, is it possible to see both the American and Canadian beaches at Normandy?
We separate them out, and we do that because if we try to see all of it, which historically in a distant past we've tried, and we found that we either had a schedule that was so tight that nothing could go wrong, and anyone that was a little late coming back from lunch just felt stressed. So we now focus on the, you can either pick an American tour or a Commonwealth tour. And that's kind of how we found is that way we can make most of our guests happy, and at the same time have an experience that is worthwhile and not rushed. It's not a place that you want to rush through. It's a place where you want to spend a little bit of quality time. So.
Thank you. Jessie in Richmond says, do the river levels fluctuate much on this itinerary?
No, not a whole lot. The Seine every once in a while has a little bit of high water. I don't believe that I can remember in almost 19 years now that we've ever, maybe once or twice we've had a week where it was a little hairy, but it's not a river that causes big problems when it comes to river levels. Not at all.
Thank you. Eileen in Methuen in the United States says, can you tell me a bit more about the food served on the ship? Is there regional cuisine?
Yes. Anywhere you travel with Viking, we infuse a healthy dose of what you find in the paysage. I was almost going to say the landscape that you travel through. Because we believe, and Alex, you will second my motion here. We believe that the food is an incredibly important part of why you travel, and certainly it's that way in France.
Yes, and the food on board the ship in the French itinerary is fantastic. The regional cuisine is really brought to you on the ship.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is from May in Las Vegas. She says, is there time to visit Honfleur? She will be sailing in April 2022.
Yes, there is an optional excursion to Honfleur. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joost. Kathleen in the United States says, can you tell us a bit more about the UK extensions?
Sure. It's actually going from France to across the Channel to Highclere, because essentially the UK extension, that means you will travel to Highclere Castle, the real Downton Abbey, and to Oxford. You will stay in Oxford and you will travel in the surrounding area. You will see Blenheim, the palace where Winston Churchill was raised, and yeah, it's a perfect little extension of your cruise in the north of France. It's a quick little hop, or actually, a quick little train ride through the Channel. It's actually, from this itinerary, we sent more people to the UK than from any other cruise, and it's splendid. We can't offer it always because it's the way it's set up is the visit in particular to Highclere is a very special visit, and obviously that's not something that we can offer week in, week out. So you would have to be careful in which dates you pick.
Thank you so much, Joost. This might be a question for Alexandra. It comes from Kathleen in the United States. She says, which Paris flea markets are worthwhile visiting?
Oh, one of the most famous one is called Les Puces, and that is in the north of Paris, and that's really fantastic. You might want to check the time though to make sure that when you are there, it is open. It has many antique stores where you can find a lot of antique artifacts.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Marty in the United States says, can you tell us a bit about the enrichment programs that are offered on board the ship in the evenings?
Sure. So the overall idea is that we always offer musical entertainment, which is for people if they want to dance a little bit or if they just want to relax and have a conversation over a drink. And then we bring in, on occasion, regional entertainers. And that's always going to be very specific. We're not going to necessarily have a German Oompa band, of course, on the Seine. It will be chansons. And we have lectures on usually on very broad issues that will cover the entire region through which you travel. And on occasion, we'll have something very specific, let's say on the French Impressionist, for instance. As you travel along the Seine, that's like a cruise into art history. And so it's appropriate on that particular itinerary to have a little bit of background. The overall idea of these lectures is that we provide you with a framework that will help you kind of appreciate and understand what you then see as you travel and as you get off the ship, and you'll go, aha, I remember this. I sat through that lecture yesterday, and now I understand things a little bit better.
Wonderful, thanks, Joost. Maybe another question for Alexandra. It's from Marlene in the United States. She says, French food looks decadent, but I am gluten sensitive. Will I have a challenge eating out or eating on board?
Eating on board, you will not have a challenge because you need to notify before you leave. You need to notify with your reservation, and we will definitely make accommodation for you. Eating out might be a little bit more challenging, especially with the baguettes and the bread that is served at every meal. So it might be a little bit challenging, but most people know and understand it. So make sure that you do say that if you are going to a restaurant in advance. On board, you won't have a problem.
Yeah, and Alex, I mean, the French cuisine is not just decadent. It can be anything.
That's true.
Anything.
That's true. Like cheese, cheese, you can always eat a lot of cheese, but no bread with the cheese.
Thank you. A similar question from Darren in New York. He says, does Alexandra have a favourite cafe or restaurant in Paris? We are going on this trip next year and can't wait.
I do. I actually have several, but one of my favorite is called Angelina, and this is an old tea house that has, and inside it has beautiful decoration. It is on Rue de Rivoli by the Louvre Museum. And I especially like this place because I like what they serve. And they serve a dessert called Mont Blanc, which is a decadent dessert with cream and chestnuts. And I like to go there to eat that.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Next question comes from Barbara in San Diego. She says, how much scenic cruising is there during this itinerary?
That's a good question, because when you look at the map, you will find that the Seine is not, it doesn't cover all that much territory. The great thing is that the Seine is a river that doesn't know where it's going, so it meanders. It doubles back on itself. Just to get out of Paris takes the better part of a day. So there is quite a bit of it, and the itinerary is really built to make sure that we offer you as much scenic cruising as we can, and obviously in the areas where there is something to see. On the outskirts of Paris, there are some areas of the river that aren't with some industrial buildup that we kind of try to pass through relatively quickly, but there are some beautiful stretches right along Chateau Gaillard and right along Vernon and La Roche-Guyon, and you see that during the day. So there is more of it than you think. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joost. Linked to that is a question from Connie in the United States, who just asks, are there any locks that the ship has to go through on this cruise?
Yes. There are, if I'm not mistaken, you go through about, it's not a lot, it's about 3 locks that you go through. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Linda in Boston asks, is there free time to paint while docked in some of these towns?
Yes, yes. And there are some, and you should just ask the program director, but I have some places in mind where you can sit, and in Vernon, for instance, which is close to Monet's garden in Giverny, there's this remnant of an old bridge across the Seine, and you see that, and you either want to take a picture or you want to sit there and draw the whole thing or paint the whole thing. So yeah, there are opportunities. Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question is from Marie in New York. She says, can you tell us a little bit about the Loire Valley extension?
Good question.
Yeah,
sure. Go ahead, Joost.
It's so the Loire Valley is where in the Renaissance the French kings and their courts built these incredible palaces, and it's also a region with huge landscapes of farms, and it's all very fertile soil. So it's a beautiful, beautiful part of France. And we bring you to, I believe, to Tours, which is smack dab in the middle. And from there, you take trips to see some of the most spectacular of these castles. And it's a good mix of spending some time in the countryside and visiting these places. It is one of those places. I think the Loire Valley is kind of mandatory almost. It's one of those, it's a long checklist of beautiful places in France that you have to visit. And the Loire Valley is absolutely one of them, I think.
I agree.
And they have great goat cheese there too.
Thank you. Well, that leads nicely to a question that's come in from Sammy in California, who says, what are your favorite cheeses? Are there any that we should try, which is not possible to get in the States?
Well, no, because, we don't have 3 hours.
There are over 1,000 types of French cheeses in France, and during your cruise, you will have the opportunity to try many different kind, especially in Normandy. Normandy is especially famous for Camembert, Livarot, Pont-l'Évêque. And you will have opportunities to try there, but or even Epoisses and Munster, well, Munster, not from Normandy, but you will have opportunities to try many cheeses. I would go to any shop and then try local cheese and au lait cru, which is not pasteurized. I would even try those.
Yes, I think that's the biggest. That's the most important thing. In the US, it's impossible to get soft cheeses that are made with raw milk, and that has to do with USDA concerns for health. The French have no such concerns, and it does make a difference in how the cheese tastes. But don't go to a supermarket. Find a good cheese shop, or go to a local market, and buy as local as you possibly can. And gosh, in Normandy you can kind of live off cheese, right, Alex? I don't think you need.
Oh, for sure. For sure, you don't need anything else. Even in Paris, there is an épicerie in Paris called La Grande Épicerie du Bon Marché in the sixth arrondissement. I would definitely suggest a trip there. You will find local delicacies, and it's a gourmet shop in Paris that you will absolutely enjoy. And the cheese counter is exceptional.
Yeah.
Wonderful advice, thank you. Our next question comes from Darlene in Spokane in the United States. She says, my niece and I will be taking our first Viking trip in June 2022. Will it be possible to tour both the Louvre and Versailles? I know they both can take hours.
Yeah, but you can.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. You have enough time in Paris to do both.
Not the same day.
Sorry?
Not the same day, but you can.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Thank you. Donald in the United States says, what are the options for cycling off the ship? Is there an age limit for using the bikes? I assume maybe he means an upper age limit, or...
No. As long as you believe that you're and in most places now we have e-bikes, which kind of extend the range, and it extends how fit you have to be to enjoy it. No, I think there's no upper limit. I would caution you, if you haven't. This is sometimes where it goes a little, where it's a little disappointing. If you haven't ridden a bike in 30 years, this is probably not where you would want to try it again for the first time, because it's just not going to, then you're better off doing things on on foot. But I think it's an excellent way. I believe that you can go from Vernon to Giverny. It's a short little bike ride. It's through beautiful countryside, and there's really no better way to experience that than on a bicycle.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question comes from Laura in San Antonio. She says, we are planning our Paris and Normandy trip for December, as that is the only time we have available. Will going in the winter affect many of the visits or tours? She understands, for example, that the gardens will not be in bloom.
Well, Giverny actually is going to be closed, and we will have an alternative program. They close the garden for the winter. Other than that, it will have the tremendous advantage that in many places there will just not be summer crowds. So it has its upsides and its downsides. And Alex, you chime in here, but I think Paris is beautiful in the rain. I just think it's one of those rare cities where even if it rains, it's still. And I actually once was in Paris close to my birthday, which is in December, and it was snowing, and it is magnificent. You can always go to Paris, 365
Yes.
days of the year.
The advantage is you will have all the holiday lights everywhere,
Yes.
which will be beautiful. So you will see all the things.
Yeah.
Thank you. And similar to this, Valav in Philadelphia asks, what is it like going at Thanksgiving time?
That's November. It's the same.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. David in Atlanta says, is it possible to combine 2 France River cruises back to back?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. We call it France's finest, the south and the north.
And then you can add
the Rhône and the Seine.
Exactly, and then you can add the west and go to Bordeaux.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually, it's all, and from Bordeaux, you go to get from Paris to Bordeaux, you go through the Loire Valley.
Excellent.
Thank you. This might be a question for Alexandra. It comes from Gail in the United States. It says, can you recommend a place to learn how to make macarons?
That is a great question. That is a tricky question because macaron is one of the most difficult cookies to execute. I can recommend a lot of places where you can buy them and eat them. La Durée is one of the most famous shop where you can buy macarons. There is a shop, tea house, and a shop by the Madeleine area, which is also close and in a similar neighborhood as the Louvre. That's where the first shop of La Durée opened, and then there is one on the Champs-Élysées, of course. There is a few other shops. I would recommend going to La Durée and trying all their flavors.
Wonderful, thank you. Hannah in Philadelphia asks, does Viking have any French-speaking tours?
No, you mean like tours where you could practice your French skills, maybe? No, we work with one language on board and one language on the shore excursions. But you're traveling through a country where everyone will speak French to you if you are so inclined.
Thank you, Joost. Next question comes from Dominic in Arizona. He says, are there any wine regions along this itinerary? And if not, do you have any cruises in areas that focus on the wines of France?
The Normandy region has no wine. They have Calvados, though, which is a distillate from apples, which you absolutely have to try while you're there. It's really good with cheese. It allows you to, you have a lot of cheese and it feels like heavy in your stomach. And then you have a little glass of Calvados and you can start all over again. It's called the Trou Normand. It kind of puts a hole in your stomach where you can then, eat a little bit more. The south, of course, the itinerary from Avignon to Lyon and the Bordeaux cruise, those are wine cruises. You can call those wine cruises because there's a lot more to do on these cruises, but wine in those regions is everywhere.
Wonderful, thanks, Joost. Adriana in Far Hills, this might be a question for Alexandra, says, can you recommend the best shopping experiences in Paris?
The shopping in Paris is second nature. Depending on what you want to purchase, shopping on the Champs-Élysées is always fantastic, but it could be a little bit pricey. The Marais neighborhood is a little bit less pricey, will be more artsy. Saint-Germain is also a great area to shop for clothes and bags and accessories. If you go to La Grande Épicerie du Bon Marché, Le Bon Marché is a gigantic place where gigantic mall where you can purchase everything that you can dream of, and that neighborhood also has many perfume shops and fashion shops. I would recommend going there. If you only have limited time, maybe try the Bon Marché.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you. Our next question comes from Linda in Dallas. She says, does Viking provide instructions on where to get on the ship at the beginning of the cruise? She will be doing her own pre-trip to the Alsace and will get to the embarkation point by herself. She's going to be traveling in October 2022.
Yes, of course. Yep. You will get everything that you need, and it's relatively straightforward. I'm taking a wild guess that if you're spending time in Alsace, you will then take the TGV into Paris from Strasbourg. And then outside of the train station, you can hop on a taxi and that will take you to the ship. Yeah, it's simple enough.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Joost. Rod in Beaver Creek in the United States says, what's the weather like in May?
Alex, what's the weather like in Paris in May?
So there is actually a saying in French, which says "Mais fais ce qu'il te plaît," meaning you can finally get rid of your winter clothes because summer arrives. And the 1st of May in France, it's very popular day. The 1st of May is where every French people give to people that they like, their friends, their family, a little bouquet of flower of lily of the valleys, muguet. And it really puts a milestone into spring has arrived. So May is perfect.
Wonderful, thank you. Paul in Portland says, we are booked for April 2022 with a post-cruise extension. How easy is it to take a day trip to Chartres?
It depends on where you are taking that trip from. But that's again, that's a bit of a tough one. You could take the train. It would take a full day, mm-hmm. And then you could travel by train, and because you're going to Chartres, I'm assuming because you want to see the cathedral, and if you can get a good train connection, you walk out of the train station. It's literally like a 7-minute walk from the train station to the Grand Cathedral, and it's doable, but it will eat into your time that you have in Paris. That you need to kind of be aware of, but it's perfectly doable. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question about shopping. This one is from Griff in Williamsburg. He says, if a visitor purchases an item in a French store, will the merchant arrange for mailing the item back to the home country of the visitor, or is that up to the purchaser?
I think it depends what you purchased in which shop, and it will depend what you purchase. If you, I think if you purchase alcohol, there is restriction. You won't be able to ship that. If you purchase luxury items, I think I'm not sure. It depends on the shop, really. Yeah.
A lot depends on the shop. I think anywhere in Paris, it's easy. You go somewhere outside of Rouen and you, I don't know, it's going to be a little bit more difficult.
Lovely, thank you. A question from Kathleen in Corvallis. She says, for winter travellers, I know we were talking about the holidays earlier, are the Christmas windows at and near Galeries Lafayette still a big feature? She said she lived in Paris when her daughter was born, and when she was 3, she was enthralled by them.
Yes, definitely. And everywhere else, on the Champs-Élysées, Le Bon Marché, windows are definitely a staple during the holidays.
Wonderful, thank you. Marianne in Thousand Oaks says, I'm looking forward to this cruise in early summer. Where would you recommend tasting Calvados?
On board.
Yes, that's actually that's a good answer, Alex. I like that. Because we do have all kinds of Calvados on the ship. And there are opportunities just outside of Rouen. where we have an optional excursion to a farm where you can try it. But essentially, as of, you leave the Ile-de-France in Vernon, and then you're in Normandy, and anywhere in Normandy, Calvados is what people drink. So you can do that almost anywhere as soon as you're past Vernon, which is where the Giverny Gardens are.
Wonderful, thank you, Joost. Louis in Tucson, Arizona says, I love cooking. Are there any excursions where I can learn a bit more about French cooking techniques?
There's a little bit of that outside of Rouen, and we have the food tours in Paris that we offer talk a lot. There's not really any instruction, but they talk a lot about how you prepare food. The French are obsessed. You can't have a longer conversation than 20 minutes with any French person without getting into how to best prepare certain dishes. So you'll be well placed.
And on board, we have some cooking demonstrations.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. This is probably the last question we've got time for tonight. It comes from Donald in Austin, Texas. He says, is the Le Marais district interesting? Can you tell us a bit more about it? And he says, thank you for such an interesting presentation.
Alex, you go ahead. Le Marais.
Le Marais, I really like this neighborhood. Le Marais is particularly anchored with a square place called Place des Vosges. And Place des Vosges was actually the palace of the king before the Louvre. So before the Louvre existed, it was in the Place des Vosges, and that's definitely worth a trip.
Yeah. One of my favorite neighborhoods too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We have one more specific question that's come in from Marianne. She says, are there any museums in Paris dedicated to the resistance movement during World War II?
Yeah, there is. And I think that is actually in the Marais, if I'm not mistaken. The Marais, historically, that was the Jewish neighborhood. So a lot of that history you can find there. And I'm trying to think exactly what it's called and where exactly it's located. But yes, so definitely not just the resistance, but also what happened in Paris during the war gets a lot of attention in that district.
Wonderful, thank you. Just looking, we've got a lot more questions coming in actually. Tony says, can you recommend a tour guide who would take us to Versailles during the Paris extension?
That's a tough one. Depending on when you travel, tour guides would be in short supply, I think. You would have to ask the program director on the ship to make that connection. It's really, I would not be able to say, okay, well, this person is super brilliant. What I would recommend, if Versailles is very high on your list, go on their website, do a little bit of research. I believe that by now they have it in English, and most of the site is now in English. It's not just a few pages. There are special things that you can do. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, they I don't know if they still do it, but a few years ago, they had this feature where you could get a tour that was called The Keys to the Palace. And it literally, you travel with someone from the palace through the entire area. And it's not just the palace. There are other outbuildings that are really, really interesting. And that person literally carries keys to places that you could normally not visit. So there is a host of different things that you could do. The one thing, if you want to spend, either go on with us, travel with us, because we have your tickets before we go there, and that saves you a ton of time. This is a real drawback from trying it on your own. If you would want to travel individually, make an arrangement with the palace. But that's really, it's expensive. It's really for people like my wife who just love Versailles. like nothing else, no other place. So then you could, if that's the case, then you can splurge.
Wonderful, thank you, Joost. A question coming from Maureen in the United States. She says she will be sailing with a group of friends in September 2022. She's very much looking forward to it. Many of them will be celebrating a special birthday or an anniversary. What can happen for that when they're on board the ship?
We kind of have a standard type of celebration that happens at dinner, and you can go on the website, or you can ask our someone in the call center. We can set that up. If it's a celebration that is a little bit larger, then it's a matter of perhaps making a phone call ahead of time and seeing what is possible. We can do quite a few things. Keep in mind, though, that there's only one dining room, one lounge. So if you want to have a celebration, you're likely going to have to invite a few extra guests, if you know what I mean. There are no separate rooms on the ship. But it's definitely something that we do. It's something that the crew totally gets into, and it's always great fun.
Wonderful. Just a nice message that's come in here from Christine in Dublin in the United States. She says, Alexandra and Joost's presentation was delightful.
Thank you.
Another question has come in from Susan in the United States. She says, is it possible to eat at Jules Verne in Paris? Would you need to schedule this during a before or after extension?
I think you would have to call it advance to make sure that there is a table open.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question comes from Eleanor. She says, are the river buses still in operation? I guess the ones you can hop on and hop off.
Bateau bus, yeah. Oh no, they're not called bateau bus in Paris, are they? No, but they still do. The bateau mouche. Yeah, no, they still do them. Yeah. That's actually the best way to do it during the day, where you can, if that group of school kids ends up on your ship, you just get off and you walk a little bit, and then you get back on at the next stop. That's your best option now that I think about it.
Wonderful, thank you, Joost. Robert in Brookfield in the United States says, we are taking the Marseille to Lyon tour and then the Paris to Normandy tour. What is the train ride like in between the two cities?
It's fast.
Yes. C'est le TGV. It's fine. It's nice. It's easy. We try different things, and we land it with the train simply because it takes you to, a lot of people, especially when they're coming from the south and they're headed for Paris. We've done things where we would take people on a coach ride, and we would stop here and we would stop there. And we found that most people just want to get to Paris as quickly as possible. So that's what we do now. And like Alex just said, it's fast.
Great, thank you. Helen in Little Rock says, what else is there to see in the Louvre other than the Mona Lisa?
There is a lot. There is a lot. There is Venice de Milo that you can see. There is it's hard to say, because you could spend an entire year going there every day and not see everything that the Louvre has to offer.
Yeah, it's enormous, and as a matter of fact, you could have a perfectly fine experience in the Louvre with a lot of art from 2 millennia or more, and not see the Mona Lisa. I would almost turn it around and say, sometimes the Mona Lisa is, it gets very crowded. And then you stand in front of her and you have a little time, because there are other people that also want to see it. And yes, it's lovely, but it's just one of so many incredible pieces of art in that museum.
Thank you. Bill in Durham says, is it possible to get from Paris to Auvers, Van Gogh's resting place, and back again in a day?
Yes, but it is kind of tricky, because Auvers is not it doesn't have a good connection. It's a small little town, so it doesn't have a good connection with public transport. But it's doable if this is kind of what you have in mind. And I have to say, it's one of, it's you need to read up, of course, on Vincent's life story. And then the cemetery has Vincent and Theo right next to each other, and they're very small little gravestones. But it is such. I mean, I was there, and I'm not I don't usually cry, but it's a very, very emotional place. If you know what they went through, and if you know how much Theo meant to his brother, it is a very, very special place. You would take a suburban train to get to Conflans, and in Conflans you would have to get a taxi. And it's the taxi is probably each way is going to cost you, I would say, 80 euros or so. But it's doable, and it's a quest. If you're ready to do a quest, then I would do it. If it's just something that you're interested in, no, then it's a lot of trouble to go through.
Wonderful, thank you. Christine in Dublin says, can you still take a tour of the Égoutts in Paris?
Yep, still doable. Bring good shoes.
Thank you. Next question comes from Janie in Mooresville. She says, is it possible to purchase tickets for events through the ship, or would we need to do that on our own?
The ship will help, but I think I said it earlier. It really all depends on what it is that you're looking for. If it's bigger events, book your cruise. This is a big advantage of booking well in advance. You can plan some of these things around it. And then book as early as you possibly can to avoid disappointment. Especially the big events in Paris, it's hard to get into if you don't have a ticket a bit in advance. I would say the Parisians. Alex, chime in here, but the Parisians love going out. Things are sold out.
Yes, there is a lot of, like Joost was saying, I echo what you were saying, is it depends what experience you are looking for. If you just want to go to the theater to have a theater experience, there is many local theaters, and the staff on board would definitely be able to help you to secure a ticket and a reservation while you're there. But if you are specific into what you want to see, and maybe in a more famous venue like the opera, then having that secured in advance is a must.
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Diana in the United States asks, can I connect to the Paris and Swiss Alps? Sorry, excuse me, let me say that again. Can I connect the Paris and Swiss Alps tour after the Paris and Normandy tour?
You can, depending on when exactly you travel, you may have to book an extra night in Paris before you get started. But it's doable. Call the call center and or talk to your travel agent, and they'll be able to set this up for you. The trick is going to be that you want to have your extra night in a hotel that you're already staying in, either just before you do the Paris to the Swiss Alps. If you do it in the reverse direction, if you need an extra night at that hotel where you will stay on that cruise, you would want to have that be the same hotel. So, but it's possible. It's quite doable. I would do it.
Great, thank you, Joost. Francis in Bothell in the United States says, is it possible to visit Disney Paris from the ship, or from where the ship docks in Paris?
Yes. Hotels offer day tours there.
Great, thank you.
It's kind of, I don't know, Alex, I'm going to say something terrible, but I think Anaheim or Orlando are probably more enjoyable. Maybe you're doing this because you want to see them all, and then yes, you can absolutely do it.
It would take a long time, though. It's outside of Paris, so that is a trip that will take you. You won't be able to do anything else that day.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. Carol in Sturbridge in the United States says, can you recommend a restaurant for a special night out in Paris?
That's a question for you, Alex.
Depending on what you'd like to eat, Paris has a lot of Michelin star restaurants, and if you are looking for a gastronomic experience, I would try a Michelin star restaurant. If you are looking for more a local or regional or seafood experience, there are many choices that would work as well, but maybe a Michelin star restaurant if it's a very, very special night. We were talking about Jules Verne earlier, but this is something where you will need to have a reservation in advance.
Yeah. I remember one year when Christine and I went to, that was actually my birthday, and it was unusually warm in Paris, and we sat outside somewhere in the Quartier Latin, and we just had a big old plateau de fruits de mer. And that stands out as like, that was so cool, because you have Paris, you literally, I mean, you sit on the side, you know, these terraces, they're not very big. You kind of sit on the sidewalk, and Paris is right in front of you with everything going on, and you have lovely seafood, and it's the, there's nothing, seafood in Paris is better than, unless you live right on the Pacific coast, but it's so amazing. And it's, I just thought that was perfect. And they do it well, and you don't need, I mean, I agree with you that if it's special and you want to do a Michelin star restaurant, but really, I mean, if you get a little bit away from the too touristy restaurants, it's really hard to have a bad meal in Paris, I think.
I don't think it's possible.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll just read out a lovely comment that's come in from Sharon in Springfield. She says, after having spent a week in Paris years ago, I didn't think I would want to do this cruise. You have changed my mind. After 2 Viking cruises in 2022, I see myself doing this in 2023.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Great. I think this is the very last question we have got time for tonight. And I think we've got a nice video that we could show at the end to illustrate it, but it comes from Gary in New York, who says, can you tell us a bit more about the English extension to Oxford, which is offered as a pre or post cruise extension?
Sure. We talked about it a little, but I think it's a good way to end with a little video.
Beyond London's hustle and bustle is a fascinating part of Great Britain few know well. A land of verdant green hills, villages carved of stone, spectacular palaces and remarkable castles, including one which has garnered international fame. Welcome to Highclere Castle, the real Downton Abbey. Come on in. The library, familiar to television audiences as Lord Grantham's private study, is an immaculate home for more than 5,000 books. One of the most fun things in this room is its secret door, leading to my favourite room in the castle. Known as the music room, its walls are adorned with 16th century Italian embroidery. And who could forget the infamous bedroom where scenes with the Turkish diplomat who met his untimely end were filmed. Also familiar from the series are the spectacular saloon and the elegant drawing room. With privileged access to Highclere Castle, Viking offers a special experience here. Every room, every display speaks to this castle's fascinating past. No room more surprising than the Egyptian exhibit, which includes numerous artifacts and a priceless sarcophagus.
It's from about 3,500 years old or so.
The collection is from the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, who together with Harold Carter discovered the tomb of King Tut. An impressive grand palace experience unfolds before you at Blenheim Palace, where you can immerse yourself in room after room of priceless treasures. This immaculate UNESCO World Heritage Site was the seat of the Dukes of Marlborough and the birthplace of one of the most recognised leaders of our time. This is the room at Blenheim Palace where Winston Churchill was born, And over here, we have his baby vest, a tiny vest for a great man. Outside, the finely detailed gardens are a lovely place to stroll. Brought to life by Lancelot Capability Brown, who also created the gardens at Highclere Castle, Blenheim's landscape is the epitome of English design, and even includes a bridge that once had 30 rooms as part of these pristine grounds. In Oxford, exploring the hallowed halls of Oxford University is fascinating.
Karina!
Hello, Patrick. My friend Patrick never tires of sharing this place of rich history. The University of Oxford is the oldest university in the English-speaking world and has been attended by Nobel Prize winners, kings, presidents, and prime ministers. The university is actually a collection of 38 individual colleges. It's an intriguing world where every monument, every building has a story to tell. Beyond the university, at the Eagle and Child pub, you can step into the creative space of some of the world's greatest authors.
It was in this very room that C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien and a group of their friends, who were known as the Inklings, used to meet to talk about the books they were writing.
The Ashmolean Museum is another of my favourites. It began as a gallery of portraits and curiosities, with a catalogue being written by the janitor. It soon became the model of the modern museum.
It was the first purpose-built museum anywhere in the world, and now it is the oldest museum in the world.
And it's free, I hear.
It's free now. It wasn't when the Ashmolean opened in 1683.
And what did it cost then?
Hard to say, because there was no entry charge. There was an exit charge instead.
So the longer you stayed inside, the more you paid on exit.
That's right.
Very clever. Outside of Oxford, the quintessentially English Cotswolds are home to fairy tale landscapes and villages that have changed little over the centuries. Rural Britain is fascinating, and we can't wait to share its treasures with you. Our Explore More extension package makes it easy and utterly relaxing. There's never been a better way to explore the British countryside than with Viking.